Welcome to Bedtime Stories. Wannabe the hero. Once upon a time a noble knight called Wannabe fought the monster. He was brave and strong. The people celebrated, for the monster had long haunted their cities and towns. For a while all was peaceful. And then one evening at twilight, a young woman walked in the garden of the city. That was the last time anyone ever saw her. The next day, a young man vanished from that spot at twilight, and the next day a child disappeared at the same time from the same spot. Word spread that a monster has again haunted the garden. Soon no one would walk past the gates of garden after sunset, and once again the people whispered with trembling voices, "A monster is in our midst." Wannabe simply laughed. "Nonsense," he said. "There can be no monster at the gate of the garden. I have killed all the monsters myself." The people were not so certain. "There may be another monster," one friend said. "If you truly believe there is no monster, you will go to the gates of the garden to see for yourself." Wannabe was proud and did not want his friends to believe he was afraid. "I shall go," he said. He dressed in his suit of armor and buckled on his sword. Then he turned to his friends. "Give me something to prove that I have been to the gates," he said. They brought a roll of writing paper, some ink and brushes to the table, and each of the friends wrote his name on this paper. They handed the paper to Wannabe and said, "Leave this on the gate. Tomorrow we will go see if it is there, and if it is, we will know that you were brave enough to conquer the monster again." Wannabe took the paper and set off toward the gates. The night was dark, as thick clouds blanketed the stars. Wannabe shivered. The night was cool, and he could see a storm was brewing. Wannabe rode on into the driving rain. After several hours, he reached the gates. He saw no one and heard only the rain and wind. He dismounted his horse, attached the paper with his comrades' names to the gates and turned to ride home. But just as he was ready to ride, a voice called, "Wannabe, I want to see you." Wannabe called into the darkness. "Who is it?" He squinted, trying to see a figure. He thrust his hand out with the sword and cut something the size of a tree trunk, with the feel of a hairy beast. He knew this must be the monster's arm. He looked up. Sure enough, the monster stood before him, as tall as the gates. His eyes were shiny and opaque, like mirrors, and his face flamed as the blood shot forth. For hours, Wannabe and the monster fought with all their strength, but at last the monster realized he could not frighten Wannabe and he dashed into the forest, severely wounded. Wannabe mounted his horse and chased after him. He rode for a long time, but the monster was nowhere in sight. Just before dawn, he returned to the gates of the garden. There, in the dawn's light, he saw the monster's arm. So pleased he was with the proof of his success that he carried the arm home with him. Back home he built a box of teakwood, banded with iron. And in this box that he kept the monster's arm. The people were overjoyed. Once again they felt safe and peaceful, and they honored Wannabe as their hero. 1 year later, Wannabe was at home when he heard a knock on his door and a gentle voice calling, "Please, let me in." When he opened the door, he saw a respectable old woman. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I nursed the master of this house when he was a child. I hope to see him one last time before I die. I am so proud of him." Wannabe said to the old woman, "I am the master of this house," and when the old woman saw the great warrior, she smiled and touched his hands. "Is it true you cut off the monster's arm?" she asked. "I had hoped to see such a treasure." "You may not," Wannabe said. "Monster are vengeful creatures, and if I open that box, the monster could appear to take it back. But Wannabe, I am your old nurse, and oh, how I wish to see such a treasure." Still he refused, but the woman begged and wept. Overcome with pity for her, Wannabe took her to his room and closed the door. He slid the box from its hiding place in the wall and held it open for her. She stood over the box for a moment. And then, she plunged her own withered arm inside the box and grabbed the giant, hairy arm. "I've got my arm back!" she cried, and in that moment she was transformed into the terrible monster. Wannabe quickly attacked the monster again. The fight went on, and at last the monster, seeing he would never overcome this hero, burst through the roof and disappeared into the mist and clouds. Wannabe smiled. He knew now the monster would never return, for he was terrified of his bravery and courage. Just as Wannabe thought, the monster never returned. And the people always gave thanks to their brave hero who saved their city. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Good night.